What's up, guys? Ben here, bringing you another video today. Some big news happening in the Overwatch League world, and you might think, well, what does that have to do with the Call of Duty League and some of the stuff I cover on this channel? But it's an interesting situation involving Overactive Media, the parent company in Toronto Ultra, also the Toronto Defiant in the Overwatch League, and it might have some repercussions to CDL, so let's talk about it and what the settlement they just announced means. A lot of y'all, just like myself, woke up to this news this morning. Overactive Media announces agreement with the Overwatch League. There's a bunch of stuff in here, but let's explain kind of how we got here. I'll explain what I think sort of is going on here. I think there's some stuff that's also not in this release and maybe involving other teams. And then we'll talk about what this might mean to the Call of Duty League. All right, we got to back up to the middle of January. Jacob Wolf, who's been kind of independent for a second here, is kind of his own Substack. And he put out an article in January talking about the state of Overwatch League, and that a majority of the teams have retained a law firm or British law firm to negotiate with the league in terms of issues as like revenue, costs that they have, franchise fees. And Jacob outlines that the goal of these discussions is for the teams to be awarded some kind of economic relief for sustainability, i.e. that they've all paid somewhere between 7.5 to 10 million franchise payments, and they've got more coming. So this is an interesting article when it came out. I think the repercussions since then that we saw was a number of teams really didn't tweet about or really do any kind of promotion of sort of the preseason pro-am tournament that happened in the Overwatch League. So people were like, are they kind of going on strike? What's going on here? And that's kind of how we get to today. Now, let's talk about what's in this agreement specific to Overactive Media. I don't know if other teams as part of this effort have also had agreements with the Overwatch League. None of them have said anything as far as I've seen as the time I record this video, but it's possible they've all settled as well. So let's just keep that in mind. All right, let's talk about this section here as we start to get kind of in this sort of the meat of this. So he highlights the agreement includes the signing of a sponsorship deal between the Toronto Defiant and the Overwatch League, the elimination of outstanding entry fees. So sponsorship deal between the Toronto Defiant and the Overwatch League. I think it's a little bit of PR spin, to be honest. Maybe it is technically a sponsorship, but to me, it sounds like economic relief coming from Activision to the Toronto Defiant in the form of a sponsorship. So they're not really like subsidizing the team. They're not giving them like economic relief. They're calling it a sponsorship, but let's be honest. I don't know what there is to really sponsor here. I think that's really kind of just the vehicle they're using. This part's a little confusing to me, and I haven't really seen anyone sort of explain it to me. So if someone kind of knows more about the situation and kind of like what it means to me. So elimination of outstanding entry fees could mean like one of two things. I think that it could mean that any remaining fees at this point as part of like the 20 million-ish that they owed is gone. Like they're forgiven, that debt's forgiven. They don't have to pay out that part of sort of the payment plan of the franchise fees, and some of that was deferred due to COVID and blah, blah, blah. Seems like that's all been eliminated. That could also, this is the second part, it could also include maybe payments that Toronto Defiant haven't submitted and as part of this sort of negotiation lawsuit, whatever you want to call it. A little unclear, but it's probably a couple $1 million. And I think the question of it is, what does this mean? It may mean that at this point, they don't need to pay the rest of their upfront franchise fee for joining the Overwatch League. This part is interesting to me. The agreement also provides for the parties to explore further changes to the Overwatch League business plan moving forward. So this is where we're getting to kind of the CDL side of things, which is we got this merger. Don't know what's going to happen with the Activision Blizzard properties once Microsoft comes in. Bobby Kotick and his team are sort of transitioning off. I would assume this allows for more kind of modifications to the league charter that all these teams and Activision agreed to. But again, this is also kind of vague and doesn't really explain sort of the direction of those changes. It could just be a bunch of words on a paper, and it's more just to kind of give a stance from Activision's side that they're open to further conversations on this. So we'll see how it plays out. And then kind of the last paragraph here, because there's a little bit of a blurb from Adamu, which is interesting, but I don't think it really, it's just PR spin, doesn't mean much. The value of this agreement, which includes early payment of league revenue share, which is another part that we haven't talked about, the sponsorship agreement and the elimination of entry fees, is valued at 10.8 million Canadian dollars. And they're obviously reporting that this year. So the early payment of league revenue share is interesting. I'm very curious what this is and sort of how much, but it sounds like in combination with sort of the other vehicles, they're going to get a decent amount of cash influx this year, which is probably good to keep their operations going, both for Toronto Defiant and for the CDL. So I think, look, overall, my big kind of key thing, and before we get to the CDL side, is I don't know if other teams, as part of this, we go back to the Jacob Wolf thing, as part of this, I don't know if other teams have also had these settlements. If they have, we don't know if they've, agreed to other terms, the same terms. A lot of the other teams don't really or don't need to put out these PR statements. They don't really do a lot of press releases. So it's possible that a lot of them have gotten this relief as part of the settlement, and they're not really going to say anything publicly. And Toronto's the one really messaging it. So that's a key thing. The Overwatch League, there might have been a lot of money going this way as far as the Overwatch League goes. Maybe we may see some kind of confirmation of it on any one of the Activision Blizzard sort of financial reporting documents they need to put out as they are a public company. But I think we'll keep key, and I'll kind of put any updates out if we see other teams kind of make note of this. So I think let's get to the CDL side. Could we see the same happen in the Call of Duty League? So Overwatch League, before we get there, the Overwatch League, is in a tough situation. The gameplay and sort of the player base for Overwatch 2, which is supposed to be massive, supposed to be a relaunch, hasn't really materialized. Viewership for the league is kind of iffy. They don't have a lot of marketable stars in North America, so that makes things really tough. So they have a lot of factors, I think, that the CDL doesn't have. And so for those teams to kind of keep this process going and kind of continue to invest in this game, they needed more economic relief. Now, I could see them apply the same argument in the Call of Duty League space. It might be a little bit trickier. As you guys know, with the Call of Duty League, this is probably going to be the most watched season of the league so far. Champs is going to be apparently the biggest ever Call of Duty attended event of all time. So, there's a lot of positive growth in the CDL. The Overwatch League doesn't have. But I do think eventually we're going to come to this conversation in regards to Call of Duty League of post-Microsoft merger, what does it look like? I think the barrier of the entry fees is too high, and it's going to prevent you from expanding to maybe the 16 number. That would make things a little bit better in terms of the format, number of teams, number of spots, getting more players in, sort of increasing sort of the operating sphere of things. So what I think could happen in Call of Duty League is, I think in the same way we see it with the Overwatch League, we could see Activision come to a deal with the CDL teams about some economic relief, maybe getting rid of some of the franchise fee payments. Keep in mind that the Overwatch League predates the Call of Duty League by a couple of years. So those Overwatch League teams were farther ahead in those economic payments. Keep in mind the Call of Duty League, the first year it started, COVID hit. So they didn't really haven't had a full non-COVID season until last year, where they had a full run of actual LAN events. Year one, they only got a third of the way through before COVID hit. And then Cold War was basically, there was just 2 LANs at the end of the year. Vanguard was kind of the first year they really could do a full cycle. And then this year was the full, with sort of the end of, the pandemic's still kind of going on, but you know what I mean? Things have kind of opened up a lot since 2019, 2020. I mean, my personal opinion is I think Call of Duty League needs to get to a point where we can expand to add at least 4 more teams. I think that removing franchise fees, giving them economic relief, figuring out how to deal with the situations around teams that are kind of in iffy financial shape, just like the Los Angeles Guerrillas, is really, really key to keeping the growth going on in the Call of Duty League. Because I think, unlike the Overwatch League, there's a real path forward for the league. I think the interest is there. The intellectual property that the Call of Duty League is based on is one of the highest grossing entertainment properties every single year in, year out. And so it just becomes more of a clear marketing exercise for the main Call of Duty game that I think is, we can talk about sustainability, but I think the upside is there just because the IP that everything's based upon is making money every year. Overwatch League and Overwatch itself is, I think, a little bit more tenuous. And I think that's why teams want a relief there in the short term. So what remains to be seen if it happens in the Call of Duty League. Maybe I'll try and ask Adam Adamu if anything's going on in the CDL. I doubt, to be honest, he'll really give any comment on that, because if there's any kind of legal sort of situation going on or any kind of negotiation, I doubt that they want that message out or want to say anything that sort of endangers any conversations they have. So keep my ear kind of close to the ground on that. But my expectation is at some point, I think over the summer, over the spring, we might start to see some public comments about the future of the Call of Duty League from the ownership groups, and whether that means that they're going to try and do the same collective bargaining process the CDL did with the OWL remains to be seen. But I think we're getting to a point where we're getting to kind of year 5 where we need to have those conversations, and this might be some leverage on the teams to start to get in that process. So yeah, that was kind of my thoughts on the news. I know not a super long video, but I wanted to kind of cover it because a lot of people tweeted at me and were like, what are your thoughts? What do you think? What does it mean for the CDL? And you know, I kind of wanted to sort of explain it. And I just think there's probably a lot more juice to drop, even on the Overwatch League side. Like, just to repeat what I said for the third time, like, I assume that other teams have also settled. We just haven't heard about it yet. And I'm very curious if they give the same spin, they have the same kind of press release, or there's more details on what the settlement was, because it seems like it's a private settlement. We're just not going to see a lot of info outside of press releases from either side. Let me know in the comments what you guys thought of the video. Like, if you enjoyed, subscribe for more. We are really going to have a lot of champs preview content coming out this week, so I'm excited, and we'll see you guys on the next video.